Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this LinkedIn Live. We haven't done one in quite a long time, so we're very happy you're back with us. In this one, we're going to have a very special guest, Marjorie from idOS, and we're going to talk more about the company, the product, the ideas of decentralized identity, and many more things. Specifically, I would say it's a really, really good time to discuss this, as we can see that specific parts of the blockchain, and especially of the decentralized nature of it, can be rebuilt or built in some of the traditional financial products that we are already, in a way, using for such a long time. But right now we have this opportunity to basically, in a way, innovate, revolutionize the systems that we have known for such a long time. And idOS network is one of the really very interesting ones that is trying to do that, and is already building products. And I'm sure in few months, few years, whenever new or additional products will be also launched, it's going to be known for, I would say, whatever they're doing for a really a lot of people. And right now we do have the opportunity again to discuss this. But before that, I would like to ask you again, I would like to ask our guest to introduce herself and tell us more about how this journey with just blockchain, crypto even started. I think this is really an interesting one because it happens that a lot of people have an interesting story there. And of course, how did you join idOS network? We do have, I would say, some followers that are pretty young, that might be lawyers, that might be interested in joining this industry. So having people like you, thought leaders, telling their story could be also an inspiration for them as well.
Thank you so much, Marina, for the welcome and for the warm introduction. As Marina mentioned, my name is Marjorie. I'm head of legal at idOS. I have been with the project since its inception. So the whole idea came together about 2 years ago, but we incorporated and set up everything properly only last year. So it has been developing for a while now, and I'm very excited to be there from day one, because definitely there's a lot more input that you can give on how the direction of things can go as well. I joined the crypto and blockchain industry 4 or 5 years ago, I would say. I was fresh out of my university, and I just started working for a decentralized identity verification company that was serving like Web3 and crypto markets. I immediately got caught up in this fast-paced environment that everything is changing by the second or the minute. I love change, and I love, big challenges. So I was immediately drawn to it, and I'm not planning on leaving anytime soon. So yeah, that's a little bit about how I joined. No funny stories or nothing crazy happened, unfortunately. But I hope, other people that also like this fast-paced environment and big challenges can also feel it's for them.
I think is once you join this industry, is really hard to leave for everyone. As you mentioned, there's so many interesting things. There's so many things that we have to follow, update each other, learn, and it is an interesting thing. But I think we have not talked a lot about the topic that we want to discuss today. For sure, not within EUCI, but I think in general, it's maybe something that is underrated. And I'm really excited to learn more as well about idOS. Specifically, what are you building? And I think what we would want to know more is, what is the verifiable credential system that you're building and working on? And how does it apply, I would say, in a legal context that we have today, that it is a reality, but at the same time, maybe what can we think about the application of this specific network in the future? And I think, the future part is even more interesting. But yeah, first learning more about the project and the product, of course.
Okay, so what's the big idea behind idOS? We designed it to be the identity layer in Web3. But in principle, anything, any type of data or anything that you can think of can actually be stored on idOS. It's a centralized storage in that sense. Think of it as a decentralized, privacy-conscious infrastructure that allows users to own, store, share, and revoke access to their identity information with full control. So instead of having to go through like KYC onboarding journeys through every new platform, every time you want to subscribe to a service, you could keep an encrypted data into your private profile and share access whenever needed with a simple wallet signature. So that means no more re-uploading passports every time, no more repeating these onboarding journeys that are just tiring every time that you want to subscribe to a service. But how does it actually work? So what is it? What are the big components there? There are two main components to idOS systems. So the first like I would say like the storage part is the decentralized storage network. It's managed by these network of node operators that would host user encrypted information, usually in the format of W3C verifiable credentials. So these are digitally signed attestations. This is the first component. There is another component on top, which is what we call access management protocol, which is basically what will let users manage their information, share with other parties for how long, and these could be tied, for example, to time locks, in the sense that this access could be controlled also in time length. All of that can also be applied when we're talking about regulated use cases, especially when identity verification is an obligation as a result of an AML law, for example. So you can think about on and off ramps, or like crypto exchanges, or even embedded banking services. But we have a clear and initial use case that we want to focus on with an idOS, even though it can be used to store any type of information and could have multiple use cases in the future. We decided to focus in a single one that we believe will help unlock this initial use case, which is KYC reusability for OpenFi. And we developed actually two different frameworks that would allow for these KYC reusability to happen. The first of those two frameworks is what we call passporting. Passporting is it's an internal name that we gave, but also like how we are thinking about naming it externally, that allows regulated entities. So think about like these exchanges or embedded banking services that I mentioned, to rely on KYC information that has been already verified and provided by another regulated entity, always with the user involvement. And that eliminates the need to recollect and re-verify the same documents over and over again. So if you want, as an obliged entity, to benefit from passporting within idOS, you will need to onboard, ensure like through an onboarding process that you actually apply a certain level of due diligence on your users, and then you establish a relationship with other obliged entities so that you can share and exchange KYC information. This is all aligned and based on international standards or even national regulations or EU regulation. For example, when it comes to FATF's recommendations, I believe that's a reliance on third parties set forth under recommendation 17 of FATFs, and also under, for example, the EU directives, the 5th AML directive, I believe chapter 4, if I'm not mistaken. So this is all a recognized and known legal framework that we just simply in a technical and seamless way made it work, so that we are an orchestrator for these mechanisms to happen in a more simpler and easier way, always with the user control. You may be thinking as well, okay, maybe my specific jurisdiction requirements are not met through the passporting design. How can I still ensure I can reuse data in that system? We also have what we call data ingestion. So users can share a credential directly with a regulated entity who can verify the KYC data package in that credential and proceed to onboard the user. But it would always keep the traditional KYC onboarding form or the funnel to collect users' information. So in practice, this could mean faster user onboarding, also likely much lower cost, and it doesn't really compromise user control. So that's the whole vision. I'm happy to dive deep into any of the points that were not clear, but I wanted to give an overview of how KYC reusability works and also how idOS could actually go beyond that.
I think this is a brilliant introduction. Thank you so much. It was very, very clear. I wanted to know more about the stakeholders. So you mentioned a few of them, like who are the stakeholders involved in this system? And in a way, how does it play for them? What is their role? And why would they use the system? Why it is different? I would think about, faster, cheaper adoption, etc. But it totally makes sense as you described before. But like, what is it, the specific point for each of the users, stakeholders, the organizations that are involved in the system?
Of course. I think it's like a very good question. And one of the things that I think that makes the whole system very powerful is that although all these different stakeholders have their own place in the system, it's always user-centric. And that is a key feature that we, never want to lose. So we have in the whole system, we have the users, which is what we call also data owners. They are the ones that actually own the data that is being stored on idOS. You also have data issuers, which are those that issue data on idOS, data consumers that consume that data. And you also have, as part of like the whole infrastructure, the node operators. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into each of those and kind of explain how it works for each of them. So as mentioned, like the users or the data owners are the, I would say, like core stakeholder within idOS, because everything kind of revolves around them. Users, they control all encrypted information that is stored on their profiles, for example, through a private dashboard that is powered by idOS, but that others can also build different dashboards so they can interact with users as well, because everything is open source. Users can then, of course, add information and request also data issuers to issue verifiable credentials into their profiles. They can then take this data in the form of credentials and share that with data consumers for a predetermined period of time that they know upfront. If there's no predetermined period of time, they can revoke that access at any time, and they can always exercise as well their right to have their data deleted from the system. So their data is always encrypted using keys that they generate themselves, so no one can access their information that has been stored on idOS unless this user explicitly allows a third party to do so through an access grant and to data consumers. So this is user sovereign that way. We have then the data issuers. As mentioned, they can issue these verifiable credentials into users' profile, always with the user involvement, and they are vouching for the accuracy of the information that is stored within the credential. And because of it, they can revoke these credentials at any time, for example, if they become invalid or outdated, which is also critical for the system to remain reliable to data consumers. It's also relevant to say that data consumers and data issuers within idOS, these roles are actually interchangeable. So a data issuer can become a data consumer and vice versa at any time. So in the end, data consumers are those that applications, platforms, regulated entities that need to access user data, for example, to comply with regulations if they are AML obliged, or to enable access to a certain feature, or just for operational needs because they want to have a liveness confirmation that is actually a real person on the other side of the screen. So they would take idOS SDK and would request access to user data, and the user would then grant the access through, for example, a wallet signature. Once that access is granted, they can query idOS and decrypt the data if they have authorization and use it to onboard the user, for example. So the beauty is that they can still retain access to that information, even if the user is not online or if the user deleted the information, as long as the access grant that the user gave has not expired or hasn't been revoked. And lastly, we have the node operators. They are like the backbone of idOS. They would host the user encrypted data. They would also enforce access permissions, maintain the consensus across the network. So they make sure data is available, synchronized, and they prevent, for example, any unauthorized access. And they are the endpoints so that all stakeholders can actually communicate and interact with the idOS network. So in short, users own the data, or data owners, issuers issue, consumers consume and rely on it, and the nodes basically enforce the rules in there.
That's brilliant, thank you. I know that there's been a lot of discussion and still is about privacy. It's a very important value in the EU. In general, we have the GDPR, etc. in the crypto industry as well, blockchain industry, we're talking about privacy a lot, and it is something that I think very like a lot of projects and also users are very mindful of. Let's focus a little bit on the users and maybe like from their perspective, thinking about why and how is this system different from the ones that they're already used to, how it might be aligned even with the EU regulations and principles that we have established in the EU, and specifically in the privacy system, like what and how can they think about privacy when they think about idOS, and of course the control as well, as you mentioned before. So they're in a way gaining control of like how and in which way their data has been and have been will be used.
Yeah, that's a very good question, very on point. I think being honest, like in the current scenario that we're living, you as a user usually don't really own your identities, because every time you sign up to a new service or a new platform, you end up handing over your personal information to what could be a centralized black box that could store it, duplicate it, maybe even sell it. Maybe it's vulnerable to leaks or data breaches, and you as a user have very little to no control over any of those processes. I think also traditional identity systems, you can say that they are broken in the way that in many cases they are outdated. They could be insecure just because there are centralized systems, and they could fail to serve this more globalized digital first world that we are living in. A lot of people out there also still lack an official identification, which also further highlights also why we need this new approach so much. We want to flip that model on its head, basically. So instead of data being like fragmented across hundreds of platforms, you have one single profile, one single place that you can actually go to, see all your information that you know is fully encrypted when stored in a distributed network that is fully controlled by you. So there is no single entity or authority that is storing all your information, avoiding, for example, that entities are data honeypots and that they are potential for data breaches, for example. So this is security, is also privacy for the user, but it's important that you decide who gets access to your data, what they can see, for how long. It's like having your own like personal data vault that is interoperable across like the internet. And it's also meant to allow for regulated use cases. So even if you are interacting with a business that is highly regulated, you would still be able to provide the same data package to onboard with that service. And I think as we, on the world that we live in today, our lives are, day by day shifting more and more to the online space. And identity verification in that sense will remain a critical challenge, but also actually increase the importance of it on how we solve it. Because identity is actually more than just, a piece of paper or a document. It reflects, or it could reflect like your relationships, your actions as a person, your beliefs. And yet we don't see, or there is no like really wide, universal, or widely accepted and used way to represent those attributes in a privacy preserving and secure, but also user controlled way in a decentralized environment. And that's what we are trying to enable, or that's the goal of what we're trying to build. And the difference is power. In centralized systems, you could be the product. And with decentralized identity and products like idOS, you are the one in control. You can onboard to different services with a single signature. You can know where your data is being processed, by whom, and for how long. So it's designed from day one to be fundamentally more fair. So yeah, I think idOS wants to, act as this decentralized storage layer that is here, of course, to enhance privacy and security, but also to integrate seamlessly with other identity solutions and other players in the market. So it's definitely a collaborative effort, and we want to create a more connected, internet-wide user base and drive a more efficient and also user-friendly digital economy in the end. And that's what actually decentralized identity should be.
I see you're very passionate about this topic, and another one that I know you're passionate about, and it is very important for idOS, it's also decentralization. So this question actually brings together everyone that has been already in a really long time, following the decentralization topic within the blockchains, and then the newcomers that I would say are interested in this area, these topics just recently. Why and where is the part, the element that brings decentralization to this idOS network? Why it is important, and at the same time, what are the features, and are there any, or how did you address the regulatory concerns? I think this is very interesting because when we think about, again, data protection through GDPR, and when you think about the new technologies, we're always thinking, okay, how can we bring the innovation into the systems that we already know today? But of course, the laws are kind of, we're not written for those new technologies, new systems. But I think you have really thought through this part. And when you described before, you have network with validators, etc., and you have like also internal systems where you can assure that this product, this network is also decentralized itself. So I wanted to know more about those two elements. How are they combined?
Okay. There's two things that we could talk about here. So I think the one that we can start with, you mentioned like about our partnerships as well. I can cover that in the end, or right after I talk about it. But I think like given the strong focus, like now in the EU, for example, with data protection, like it was really important for us to also like embed different regulatory frameworks in our design and architecture while still maintaining decentralization, of course. So I think it's key to understand or to mention that with idOS, we kind of aimed at having both. So we wanted to ensure regulatory compliance. We wanted to allow for, companies that are under regulatory scrutiny, that they are regulated, they could use the system and to actually meet their compliance needs, of course. And it needs to be, compliant with data protection regulations, so that not only idOS can process data compliantly when and if that's the case, but also those interacting with the system can ensure that they are also fulfilling their obligations resulting from these data protection frameworks. So like the key thing for us was always, of course, and foremost, like user-centric principles should be like at the top. And we implemented a lot of other GDPR principles into our architecture. So like when we look at user control, we know that under GDPR, I think it's Recital 7 or some other that I can't recall right now, like it's clearly stated that users should be like, not users, natural persons should have control over their own personal data. And this is something that we aim to deliver from day one. So as mentioned, users encrypt their information, they store it on idOS with their own self-generated keys. Not even the network, as idOS can have access to that information without the user permission. So every action from storing to sharing is always signed and participated by the user. We also don't dictate a legal basis for processing, for example, in the context of data issuers and data consumers. We aim to give those parties flexibility so that they can define themselves based on their specific role in context. What do they want to apply? And the system is flexible enough to let them tailor user interfaces so that they can actually implement, for example, a flow or a language that would be tailored to their needs and allow them to comply, for example, with GDPR. Of course, there is the question of like data deletion as well. Like this is enforced through a consensus mechanism within idOS. So, for example, if a user requests to delete information and there is no active access grants, all data will be deleted. If an access grant is active, the user can still delete their own encrypted copy, and the third party would be able to retain access to, so the data consumer will retain access to their copy regardless, but it would still enforce through the consensus mechanism the deletion of the user's copy. So there's alignment with the right to be forgotten found in most data protection frameworks around the world, and it would still align with, for example, any legitimate retention obligations that could exist as a result, for example, of AML regulations. We also aim to implement like support for compliant cross-border data flow. So there are, of course, like provisions that are in place when like relevant stakeholders sign general terms and conditions for data protection. So it aligns in general quite well with GDPR principles such as lawfulness, fairness, transparency. So we aim to operationalize, let's say, GDPR and relevant regulatory frameworks in a decentralized environment without compromising decentralization. And I think that's a very hard challenge, and it's a very hot topic. I think even today, after years that we've been having this discussion, is still something that is relevant to talk about because it remains a challenge. It's not completely solved, and a lot of people think that these are two different ends of a spectrum when in practice, like they should meet in the middle, and that's what we should go for and try to find.
But we could see that you have put a lot of thought into that, and you have addressed all this, I would say, principles, as you mentioned, that most of the data protection frameworks do have globally. So it is very, very interesting. You have mentioned before the partners. So when you're working on this, big networks, and you're working with so many stakeholders, how do you build this ecosystem that is basically helping all the stakeholders being like using this network, but at the same time, who are the partners? Who is someone that you are building this network with? And maybe I don't know, maybe you're looking for more. What is the ecosystem like?
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to kind of like debrief you a bit, and the audience as well, about our partners and like our collaborative efforts as well with like other people in the network. So one of the most exciting things to me personally about idOS is that it's not we're not building it alone, basically. So we have an idOS consortium where we bring together respected ecosystems in the space. Happy to name a few like Near, Ripple, Gnosis, Arbitrum, Aleph Zero, Tezos, Redix. And these ecosystems, they come together like through a shared goal that we all have, which is to create truly decentralized, privacy-conscious identity framework that actually works across chains, across dApps, and even across regulatory environments as a whole. So we kind of focus on different pillars for like product, growth, and compliance within the consortium. So on the product side, for example, we would refine the idOS core product, the network functionalities. We ensure that these components can scale, that they are user-friendly and still support a broader ecosystem needs. On the growth part, we would be working together to create awareness around the community. So doing events, publishing like leadership pieces, and driving adoption overall across these ecosystems. On the compliance side, we're tackling all these very real legal challenges. So like KYC reusability, and how do we enable that for regulated use cases? How do we ensure data protection regulations can be embed into idOS design without compromising decentralization, especially because there shouldn't be a single authority that is responsible for things alone in the system. And how do we ensure that the system actually meets the bar? So the consortium meets regularly to align on these different tracks. And we're also working with different building partners, for example, that are helping us ship or build the core infrastructure and other components of the network. So for example, Quill is an older partner of ours. They are the ones powering the decentralized relational database layer of idOS. We've also worked, for example, with Partisia for an MPC solution, with Lit Protocol for like decentralized account recovery, which is also a big step forward in like user control. We also work with a security audit partner called Resonance. We're also very proud to collaborate like on the compliance side with partners like UCI and other compliance partners as well, so that we make sure that we are ready to put out the idOS out there as well. Also, for example, we're doing an event that is worth mentioning, I believe, on the compliance side to also help bring awareness and education around the importance of decentralized identity, not only for Web3, but beyond, within legal professionals, compliance officers. And we're doing that initiative with EUCI, but also other partners like LexDAO, to kind of like try to create this community around it. And I think the bottom line, or the lesson that I wanted to transmit here, is that it's not a standalone product. We believe in the power of partnerships, and we can unlock a lot more together than if we were alone.
That's brilliant. And you just mentioned an event. I wanted to hear more because I think this is a good opportunity to learn more for everyone that is going to be in Paris during the Paris Blockchain Week. We're preparing something special. I would like to hear it immediately after you mentioned it. So for anyone to focus on that.
Okay. So we're doing it during Paris Blockchain Week. So it's set for the 9th of April, starting early in the morning. So it's kind of like a breakfast section, nothing too formal. It's a very intimate event, I would say. So by invitation or gated participation only. And we're bringing together like top legal minds in the space to talk about Web3 and compliance in general. We want to focus first on giving like a general overview of like decentralized identities in Web3, then focusing a little bit more on the current regulatory landscape in the world when it comes to Web3. What are the compliance challenges? So we are going to be talking about, of course, the very already known topics like markets and crypto assets and transfer of funds regulation, but also the payment service directive and regulation. We can also tap into even AI Act or the DORA or like different other topics that may be coming up on that space. And then we're going to move next to talk about something that we've been talking here as well, which is decentralization versus compliance. And kind of like the idea is to bring these top minds together so that we have a common space to talk about such relevant topics. There will be also like a little bit of like an hour and a half of networking at the end so that we can also just talk on a one-on-one basis, get to know other peers, and exchange ideas in a more intimate and informal environment as well. I'm happy to share the link. I'm not sure if that's something we can put somewhere, but it's also in our profile so that people can see a more detailed description of the event. And Marina, our host here, will also be talking as well and moderating one of the panels. So I'm very excited to, do something together with you on that front.
Likewise, we can definitely share the link. It will be shared under the comments on LinkedIn, but we have shared that before on our other social media, and we'll make sure that you have this information. So thank you for that. It's really, really exciting. And talking about regulation and talking about, let's say, the new regulations, rules, directives coming from Brussels, thinking about identity as well. Let's think a little bit about the European Digital Identity Wallet and some similar initiatives that are coming up that are really being, I would say, built and promoted within the European Commission, and are some of the identity solutions that are not coming from like, I would say, private entity, companies, etc., but are really something that is coming from the regulators. How are they combined with what you're building? How can they be used, or how do you see this combination of different state-led identity solutions versus the private ones that you're building, and specifically the ones that you're building is also decentralized? So this is going to be, I think, quite important going forward, as we do know that the digital identity wallet is going to be more and more involved and also used in future with, of course, among the European Union users.
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant question in the sense that we saw a lot of movement, not only in the EU, I think. I was reading a survey, I can't remember by who right now. I'm happy to share the source later. But it said that more than 60% of the world today, when it comes to governments, that are actually working towards some type of solution for decentralized identity. So it's not trivial when you think about the numbers that there is a kind of a shift in the mindset to move towards more government-led initiatives like this. In the EU, especially when you see through the idOS 2.0 framework, we had the European Union Digital Identity Wallet, but there is also the European Business Identity, or I completely forgot how it spells correctly, but it's also for business to kind of be able to exchange their business information in a more streamlined way and make it more interoperable across the EU and across borders, right? So like we saw a lot of initiatives such as this kind of surface, and I think the tendency is to go up, right? And in that sense, this is a huge step already to standardize how digital identity works. And I think solutions like idOS, so not only idOS, but like similar solutions as well, could be positioned to complement or even enhance those efforts. So in the idOS context, everything is open source. Everything is meant to be interoperable, chain agnostic. So it could be very easy and a no-brainer to plug into similar government-led systems that and serve as these decentralized, privacy-conscious storage layer underneath those systems. So the goal is not to replace these government-led digital identity initiatives. It's, I would say, quite the opposite. We are building tools that make identity more flexible for business, for users. It's also more user-centric, but also it's more readily useful in this digital world. And whether it's for compliance, for usability, for data sovereignty, similar systems could power and be what connects all these layers. And yeah, I see that there's actually a question from the audience that kind of connects to that. If it's okay with you, I would like to address it because it's just...
Absolutely, yeah, please do.
So when you talk about idOS 2.0 framework, we saw like initiatives come out of that, like the EU Digital Identity Wallet. We don't... in idOS, so if you're asking when do we implement idOS 2.0 in our product, in the core offering of idOS, we don't define the levels of due diligence or how that due diligence needs to be performed on a data issuer level. So what we enable is a way for those parties to exchange information when it comes to passporting or even data ingestion, in a way for users to store their information. But it's on data issuers and data consumers to establish exactly what data they would store and in which format and which way. We, of course, recommend, for example, a format for the credentials to be issued, but it's flexible enough and open source and interoperable and chain agnostic enough so that these parties interacting with idOS are the ones to determine how they want to use the system, as long as it's under certain criteria, of course. But there is freedom and flexibility because everything is supposed to be decentralized in that sense. We might decide to implement specific features that are resulting from the idOS 2.0 framework if we see that there is demand or even traction, but we are not looking to define the systems for these interactions to happen. We are an orchestrator, and in that sense, I think, as mentioned, in the context of as well like government-led initiatives, if we are to be considered, part of this whole thing in terms of decentralized identity, we could definitely be a layer that facilitates or interconnects those systems.
I think this is a brilliant thought and brilliant connection because in a way, the government-led identity systems and products, they need to interact with the private ones as well. So very much excited to see also the, in a way, implementation of the idOS to, as you mentioned, the whole framework has been finalized, but of course it's not applicable yet. So you and everyone else still have some time to work on this.
Exactly.
So looking into this and actually looking ahead, how do you envision specific decentralized identity solutions like idOS in a way impacting the world we know today? Specifically finance, maybe healthcare. We know that the European Commission has issued their program for this year, and they have been looking into healthcare specific data and how to increase also, I would say, cybersecurity and safety, online safety when it comes to healthcare data. Maybe thinking about other government services in the EU. And are there any specific use cases that you're excited about? I would say that in the crypto industry, blockchain industry, most of the applications that we can think about today are financial. So my personal, in a way, like I'm really excited about the financial use cases, and as you mentioned before, identity systems that can be reused. But just in general, again, like there's so much that we can do with the new technologies that we have today. Let's stop a moment and rethink how can we shape the, in a way, the products that we have today in a better way. And I would say rather than maybe regulating things, we can already embed this design with the technology that we have today, and it would be revolutionary already.
Yeah, I think that's also another very good question. I'm also personally very much attached, I would say, to finance. But I do see that, there are, of course, other use cases out there that are just as relevant. I think decentralized identity solutions like idOS and even others can and likely will reshape how people and individuals interact with critical sectors like finance, but also healthcare and government services. And especially, for example, in the EU and countries where we see this type of initiatives, where regulatory environment is pushing for interoperability, but also privacy. So when we talk about finance, there is still like this massive bottleneck when it comes to identity there, because of the problems that I already mentioned, like repeating onboarding processes, submitting the same documents over and over. These, of course, leads to high like customer acquisition costs, rates for user drop-off are usually high as well. You can also have compliance headaches there. Solutions such as idOS could have users verify their identity once across different platforms, resulting in better UX, lower costs, and so on. But it could also go beyond and allow for implementations with different solutions, so like modular solutions as well, when we talk about travel rule compliance or ongoing monitoring of a user behavior and transactions. So we are focusing right now, as mentioned, on KYC reusability for OpenFi, which is something I'm quite passionate about. And in itself, it's already exciting. But I also think another thing that is worth mentioning when we talk about finance that excites me is that you can give people that are living in underserved or underbanked regions the ability to actually participate in a digital economy with their own devices and a self-sovereign credential, and that could be a very big shift. I think beyond finance, there is also a lot of potential when we talk about healthcare and public services. So patients, for example, they could carry like this verifiable medical record credential type of thing with like their prescriptions, like their exams, like test results, even their insurance information, and share that with like parties they select, and like move it cross-border. So like global initiatives, I think, in the sector are also emphasizing the need for like more interoperable frameworks, and solutions such as decentralized identity could serve like as a key enabler for that interoperability in that sense. It could streamline like cross-border care and reduce even like data duplication and ensure that privacy is considered through all steps. I think it's like you can also think about like supply chains, for example, where you can have credentials being reused for like VAT registration, supplier certifications that even business could reuse like across different jurisdictions or cross borders. So at the end of the day, I think what excites me the most is that decentralized identity is not just a problem for like Web3 specifically to solve, but it's a foundation for a digital economy that is interoperable, but also private, user-centric. And I think us as idOS, we're trying to build an infrastructure that could help make this vision, at least for, what we are focusing on, a reality.
Thank you for this explanation. We are also very excited. I haven't mentioned that before, but we were very excited that idOS Network is also the newest member of EUCI. For the ones that are just joining right now, we're doing an interview today explaining what is idOS, what's idOS Network, and decentralized identity systems. We are, in a way, leading this interview also as the European Crypto Initiative, which, as you know us, we're an advocacy organization working with the EU regulators on different topics when it comes to blockchain. and technology and crypto, of course. And for the last question of this brilliant interview today, I would want us to focus on the future. So for you personally, when it comes to the idOS network, when it comes to the decentralized identity, but also about disrupting finance, as you mentioned before, and healthcare, how do you envision idOS system in 5 years, but also in general, how should we use digital credentials? How should users be empowered to use and decide on their data, on their identity systems?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the future, I think the ideal scenario for idOS and something that has been in our mind is that we want to be the default identity layer in Web3, and that's set in stone. But I think it's also beyond that. So we're talking about a future where people don't have to re-verify themselves over and over. They have a single identity profile that is fully controlled by them, that they can use to onboard to any service or protocol they want with a simple wallet signature, a face scan, or whatever that is. It's not about trying to own others people's identity. It's about giving people the power to own it, and in doing so, creating kind of like this identity layer for a digital world that is a lot more private, a lot more secure, a lot more human. And I think more than that, idOS is just not another identity system. It's a foundational infrastructure layer. What do I mean by this? That others could use it for like governance participation, compliant onboarding, but also developers could build composable applications on top of it, unlocking use cases that I haven't even imagined yet. And that could help create this kind of like network effect across even different industries. And I think that's the magic here. It's an open and collaborative framework that can lead to multiple directions. And that's the vision kind of we're building towards, I think.
That's very exciting. Thank you so much for being with us during this interview. Thank you for everyone on our LinkedIn stream. This interview is going to be recorded, so you always have the opportunity to go back on a YouTube channel. We'll also share that on our social media, on idOS social media. Don't forget to reach out to us, come to the event idOS is organizing in Paris on the 9th of April during the Paris Blockchain Week, and we really hope to see you in future. But otherwise, it's been a pleasure, and I know that anyone that wants to learn more, they can reach out to you, check the website as well. You have a lot of very interesting explanations on videos and social media. So thank you again, it was a real pleasure.
Thank you again, Marina, for the opportunity of being here and, just talking about something that I'm a lot passionate about. And for just the space where we can, kind of hopefully create more awareness as well and other peers on the importance of those discussions. And I'm very much looking forward as well for our event together and what's next to come in this partnership. I'm sure there's a lot more interesting things out there for us to do together.
I'm sure as well. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.